My daughter-in-law was all smiles when she set a glass of whiskey down in front of me at my housewarming party. "Here's to you, Dad, and to a fresh start," she said. I was just about to take a sip when my granddaughter tugged on my sleeve. I set the glass down for a quick second, and my son, standing right behind me, picked it up and drank it down without a second thought. 30 minutes later, what happened right before my eyes left me, speechlessly. Stunned. My name is Chris Sullivan, and I'm 68 years old. That number used to bother me. It felt like a timer counting down the days until I became irrelevant, ready to be pushed to the side in a world that only cares about youth and speed. But standing in the living room of my new craftsman-style home in Portland, Oregon, on that bright June morning, I felt something I hadn't felt since my wife, Eleanor, passed away 2 years ago. Hope. This house wasn't just a purchase. It was a statement. After 30 years of designing buildings for other people, staring at blueprints until my eyes blurred, and managing job sites in the wet Northwest rain, I had finally built something for myself. Well, not built from scratch. I bought it from a couple moving down to Arizona for retirement, but I hand-picked every important detail. The oak floors that caught the morning light just right. The built-in bookshelves in the living room, deep enough for my architecture collection and Eleanor's favorite novels. And that east-facing kitchen window, where I could drink my coffee and watch the sun rise over the neighbor's maple tree. That morning, I walked slowly through every room, running my hand along the low doors and checking the trim where the walls met the ceiling. An old habit from a lifetime of catching contractors trying to cut corners. Everything was solid. Everything was mine. At 68, I was starting over, and for the first time in a long time, it felt right. The house had 3 bedrooms. One for me, one I turned into an office, and one saved for my 8-year-old granddaughter, Grace, when she stayed over on weekends. She was a bundle of energy, always full of questions, with Eleanor's eyes and her mother's fierce determination. I had already set up a small drawing desk in her room, and the stuffed animals she left on her last visit were lined up neatly on the bed, looking like a little jury waiting to judge my decorating skills. My son, Matthew, and his wife, Ophelia, lived 20 minutes away. It was the perfect distance, close enough for Sunday dinners, but far enough that I didn't come across as overbearing, which was something Eleanor used to warn me about all the time. "Let them live their lives, Chris," she'd say. "That. You raised a good man, trust that." And I did trust Matthew. He was a high school English teacher, patient and thoughtful, the kind of son who called just to check in, who remembered his mother's Memorial Day without needing a reminder. At 38, he had built a good life for himself. 9 years ago, he married Ophelia by the Columbia River, and they welcomed me into their lives with a genuine warmth. At least in the beginning. Ophelia, though, there was always something about my daughter-in-law I couldn't quite put my finger on. She was charming, no doubt about it. Being a real estate agent, she knew how to smile at just the right moment and make you feel like the most important person in the room. When I told them I was buying this house, she couldn't have been more supportive, asking all the right questions about square footage, property value, and neighborhood perks. She was ambitious. Expensive cars, designer bags, and her real estate commissions were supposed to support that lifestyle. But over the years, I noticed Matthew quietly taking on more and more of the household bills, while Ophelia chased big deals that never seemed to fully materialize. "None of my business," I always told myself. Every marriage has its own financial dynamic. That was until about 3 months ago, when she suggested over dinner that I should look into putting the house into a family trust. Just for estate planning, Dad, she had said. She'd called me Dad since their wedding day 9 years ago, but lately, that word felt less like affection and more like an attempt to mark her territory. It would make things so much easier for Matthew when the time comes. You know how complicated probate can be. I just smiled and changed the subject. I was 68, not 88. Besides, the way she said, "When the time comes," didn't sound like concern. It sounded like anticipation. I brushed the thought away immediately. What kind of father-in-law suspects his daughter-in-law of having hidden motives? Eleanor would have told me I was being paranoid, but Eleanor was gone, and my architect's intuition, the kind that spots a load-bearing wall pretending to be decorative, or structural issues hidden under a fresh coat of paint, kept whispering in my ear that beneath Ophelia's helpful attitude, something was off. I stepped out onto the back porch to clear my head. Tonight was my housewarming party, my chance to show this place off to the people who mattered most. Matthew and Grace were coming, of course, along with my old co-worker, James Fletcher, who helped me navigate the transition into retirement, and a few neighbors I'd met while moving in. Even Ophelia was invited, though I found myself strangely reluctant to have her in my space, touching my things, and evaluating everything with that professional eye she used on properties. The backyard wasn't large, but it was perfect. I set up the grill on the stone patio. The oak tree that had convinced me to buy the property spread its branches over the lawn like a blessing. And I planned to plant a vegetable garden along the fence next spring, if my knees could handle the bending. Inside, I set out glasses and plates, arranged the furniture for easy conversation, and bought a bottle of good whiskey that Matthew liked. Everything was ready. Everything was perfect. So why, underneath all the excitement, did I feel a knot of anxiety? Why did my mind keep drifting back to the smile Ophelia gave me when she brought up the family trust? Why did I find myself double-checking the locks on the doors, the passwords on my accounts, and the wording in my will? "You're being ridiculous," I said out loud to the empty house. My voice sounded strange in the new space, like it belonged to someone much older. "It's just a party." I checked my watch. 6 hours until people arrived. 6 hours to shake off this uneasy feeling and remember that I was here to celebrate something good. After Eleanor passed, I worked long hours to help put Matthew through college. For 30 years, I saved every penny. This house wasn't just wood and nails. It was proof that sacrifice paid off, that patience bore fruit, and that a man could still build something lasting after losing so much. Tonight was about joy, fresh starts, and showing my son and granddaughter that I was doing well. I stood by the living room window, looking out at the quiet street, watching the shadows of the maple trees on the manicured lawns, watching neighbors walk their dogs, and kids riding bikes without a care in the world. The kind of sight you only get in a safe neighborhood, where people actually know each other's names. This was my home, my sanctuary, my reward for decades of early mornings, late nights, studying blueprints and saying no to luxuries so Matthew could say yes to opportunities. No one was going to take this away from me. At 6:15 that evening, the doorbell rang right on time. I've always appreciated punctuality, a habit built from decades of construction deadlines, where 15 minutes could mean the difference between staying on schedule or face costly delays. Looking through the front window, I saw James Fletcher standing on the porch, holding a bottle of wine, a relaxed smile on his face that felt as comfortable as an old jacket. "Chris," he said as I opened the door, pulling me into the kind of back-patting hug men our age have perfected over the years. "This place looks even better than you described. You always knew how to pick a house with good bones." James was 65. A contractor who had built half the structures I designed in Portland over the years. We spent 30 years arguing over load-bearing walls and building codes, and somewhere along the way, we became the kind of friends who didn't need to talk every week to know the support was always there. "Come on in," I said, taking the bottle. "You're early. Wanted to get a look before the crowd gets here." He stepped inside, his contractor's eye immediately taking inventory of the crown molding, the hardwood floors, and the way the evening light hit the west-facing windows. "Oak floors. Smart move. They'll outlast both of us. That's the plan." Over the next few minutes, more guests arrived. Frank Morrison, an architect I'd worked with on a hospital project back in the 90s, showed up with his wife. Helen Tucker, who lived 3 houses down, brought a casserole that smelled like pure comfort and good intentions. There was also an older couple whose names slipped my mind, though their genuine smiles made that feel beside the point. The house filled with the exact sounds I'd pictured. Conversations, laughter, ice clinking in glasses, and the soft hum of people discovering mutual acquaintances or shared complaints about Portland weather. I'd set up speakers on the back patio, and jazz floated through the open door, mixing with the smell of smoke from the grill I'd lit earlier. I was refilling the ice bucket when the doorbell rang again. Through the window, I saw Matthew's car pulled up in the driveway. A familiar warmth bloomed in my chest. That simple, deep-seated joy of having my son around. Grace burst through the door first, a whirlwind of pink dress and blonde hair. "Grandpa, your house is huge." I knelt down, my knees protesting slightly, and pulled her into a hug. She smelled like strawberry shampoo and childhood. "Not too big for you, sweetie. I saved a room with your name on it." "With the desk for my drawings?" "The very same one." Matthew walked in behind her, and I stood up to hug my son. He had Eleanor's height and my build. At 38, he still carried himself like a teacher, his shoulders slightly rounded from years of leaning over student desks. "Dad, this place is incredible. Seriously, Mom would have loved it." "Yeah, she would have," I said softly. That familiar shadow crossed his eyes at the mention of Eleanor, but then he smiled. "Come on, I want you to meet someone." That's when Ophelia stepped through the door, accompanied by a woman I'd never seen before. Ophelia was wearing an outfit that looked far too expensive, the kind that probably cost more than Matthew made in a week, paired with a camera-ready smile. "Dad, you remember Claire, right?" Ophelia said brightly. "She helped organize our wedding. I ran into her last week and insisted she come by tonight." The woman extended her hand. "Claire Davidson." "It's a pleasure, Mr. Sullivan. Ophelia's told me so much about you." She looked to be in her early 40s, with dark hair pulled back in a sharp professional style. Her handshake was firm, her eye contact direct. There was something about her that felt carefully calculated, not unfriendly, but with a guarded composure that reminded me of a lawyer or an accountant. "Call me Chris," I said. "Any friend of Ophelia's is welcome here." As the evening wore on and I moved among my guests, I found myself watching Claire. Her questions, framed as polite small talk, were oddly pointed. She'd compliment the house, then casually ask about the square footage. She admired the neighborhood, then brought up property values. She mentioned retirement planning in a way that felt less like conversation and more like an attempt to gather information about my finances. Wedding planners didn't usually care about their clients' financial portfolios. I was still trying to decide if I was being hyper-vigilant or observant when Ophelia's voice cut through my thoughts. "Dad, let me make you a drink. Old-fashioned, right?" She was already standing at the improvised bar, on my kitchen counter. Whiskey, bourbon, a bucket of ice, and the mixing glasses I'd bought specifically for tonight. Her movements were confident, like someone who'd worked behind a bar before, measuring and pouring with practiced ease. I kept my eyes on her hands, watching as she poured one drink with extra care. Her eyes flicked quickly between me and the glass, and she placed that specific drink on a small paper napkin slightly set apart from the others. Grace appeared at my side, tugging on my sleeve. "Grandpa, look at what I drew at school." She handed me a piece of paper covered in crayon drawings of what could have been a house or a spaceship. With Grace's art, you never quite knew. "It's beautiful, sweetie. Is that my new house? It's a castle to keep you safe." The word safe sent a strange chill down my spine, but I smiled and kissed the top of her head. The safest castle in all of Portland. The party continued around us. James was telling a story about a building inspector we both used to deal with. Frank Morrison was debating the merits of sustainable architecture with Helen Tucker, who had strong opinions on solar panels. In the background, Miles Davis played softly through the speakers, blending with conversations about property taxes and avoiding Interstate 5 traffic. It should have been a great evening. In fact, it was, except for Claire, who was talking to Matthew while occasionally glancing at me with a calculating look, and Ophelia, who had finished mixing the drink and was walking toward me, holding a glass carefully in both hands with a smile that was a little too bright. As Ophelia approached, the crystal glass caught the light, the amber liquid swirling as she moved. Her smile was flawless, the kind of polished, professional look real estate agents use like a tool. Warm on the surface, but lacking any real warmth underneath. And her eyes, the way she looked at me, reminded me of how contractors look at buildings scheduled for demolition. Assessing, calculating, waiting to see which wall gives way first. "Here you go, Dad," she said, holding the glass out to me. "Made it just the way you like it." She offered it with both hands, almost like an offering. "Your favorite, Dad," she repeated. "Enjoy." I took it, feeling the cold weight of the crystal in my hand. The amber liquid reflected the light from the chandelier Eleanor and I had picked out 30 years ago. "Thank you, Ophelia. You didn't have to do that. No trouble at all." Her smile was static, perfect. Too perfect. My stomach churned with a sudden gut feeling. The same instinct that had saved dozens of construction projects over my 30-year career. The kind of intuition that notices when a beam is an inch off, when the foundation plans don't align, or when a contractor's quote seems too good to be true. I placed the glass on a nearby side table. "I'll drink this in a bit. Let me go say hello to everyone first." For a split second, her expression faltered. Disappointment? Frustration? Then the polished smile clicked right back into place. "Of course, Dad. Whenever you're ready." The doorbell rang again. I turned toward the foyer, relieved for the interruption. That must be David. He texted saying he'd be a little late. I didn't see Matthew step up behind me. I didn't see him reach for the glass on the side table or notice which one he picked up. By the time I opened the door and welcomed David, an old colleague from my firm days, Matthew had walked over to the window, holding the whiskey glass, laughing with James Fletcher about the end of the school semester. The party settled back into its flow. Conversations drifted comfortably. Grace showed me another drawing, flowers carefully colored in around the front door of Grandpa's castle. I held her close, feeling the weight of her small arms around my neck. For a moment, everything felt fine. Then, 15 minutes later, I noticed Matthew wiping his forehead. "You okay, son?" I asked, stepping over. "Yeah, just getting a little warm in here." He loosened his collar. His face looked flushed. "Maybe it's the crowd?" I frowned. The thermostat was set to a comfortable temperature. "Want some water?" "No, I'm good." He waved me off and turned back to James. But I caught the moment. He leaned against the wall to steady himself. 10 minutes after that, Matthew found Ophelia in the kitchen. Standing near the open doorway, I overheard them. "I have a headache," he said, "and I feel a little dizzy. Did I drink that old-fashioned too fast?" Ophelia's voice was smooth, full of gentle concern. "Maybe you're coming down with something, honey. You've been pushing yourself so hard with final exams." "Yeah, maybe." He pressed his fingers against his temples. I set down my own untouched drink and watched him through the doorway. His movements were heavy, his footing unsteady. He didn't look intoxicated. He looked unwell. 5 minutes later, Matthew's nose started bleeding. It wasn't just a drop or two. It was flowing steadily. He grabbed a napkin and pressed it to his face, but it soaked through in seconds. He grabbed another, then another. His eyes widened in sudden confusion. "Chris!" James called out sharply. "Something's wrong." The room went dead silent. Everyone turned. I covered the distance to Matthew in 3 long steps. "Sit down. Lean forward. Don't tilt back." I grabbed a handful of napkins from the table and pressed them firmly against the bridge of his nose. Decades ago, after a job site incident, I took a first aid course, and the basic steps came back to me automatically. But blood kept seeping past the paper, dripping down his chin and onto his shirt. "Dad, I don't feel right." Matthew's voice was slurred, heavy. His knees buckled under him. I caught him, easing him down to the floor as gently as I could. "Someone call 911. Ophelia appeared beside us, dropping to her knees with tears running down her face. Matthew, can you hear me? Oh my God, what's happening?" Grace's terrified voice cut through the chaos. "Daddy, Grandpa, what's wrong with Daddy?" "Though." "He's going to be okay, sweetie," I said, though I could barely convince myself. The bleeding wouldn't stop. Matthew's focus drifted, his eyes rolling back slightly. "Hang in there, son." I kept pressure on his nose. But blood was beginning to trickle from the corners of his mouth, seeping from his gums. James was on the phone with 911, his voice remarkably steady as he gave our address. Frank Morrison moved the other guests back to give us space, while Helen Tucker gently led Grace into the other room. The operator's voice came through James's speakerphone. "Is the patient conscious?" "Barely," I called out so she could hear me. "He's bleeding from his nose and mouth. We can't stop it. Has he taken anything in the past hour?" "Whiskey," I said. "Just whiskey. We're having a party. Any medications? Known allergies?" "No, nothing." Matthew's grip on my hand suddenly went limp. "Matthew." Ophelia's scream sounded so raw, so desperate, so completely believable. I looked up at her, and for a fraction of a second, our eyes locked. Her eyes were wide, brimming with tears, but deep down, something didn't line up. Something was wrong. The ambulance arrived 8 minutes later. Sirens echoed through the street as the paramedics moved with trained efficiency, taking over from me immediately. Possible anticoagulant overdose. One paramedic muttered to his partner while checking Matthew's vitals. Pupils are reactive, blood pressure is dropping. Let's move. They loaded Matthew onto the stretcher. I climbed into the back of the ambulance, taking a seat beside him. I'm coming too, Ophelia said, stepping forward. The paramedic shook his head. Only one family member in the back. Meet us at Providence Portland Medical Center. She backed up and nodded, tears still streaming down her face. I'll grab Grace and be right behind you. As the heavy doors slammed shut, I held Matthew's cold hand. The siren wailed above us. Looking out the small rear window, I caught one last glimpse of my house. The home I had dreamed about for 30 years. And there stood Ophelia in the doorway, surrounded by stunned guests, wearing a mask of pure grief. But I had spent 30 years studying blueprints, evaluating people, and reading the silence between what was said and what was actually meant. In that moment, as the ambulance sped through the streets of Portland with my son's life hanging in the balance, a single realization took root in my mind. That drink was never meant for Matthew. It was meant for me. The fluorescence of the emergency room waiting area made my eyes ache. Or maybe it was just the sheer exhaustion and fear. Dr. Melissa Stone stepped through the double doors, her face set in a grave expression. She looked to be in her early 40s, with tired eyes that carried the quiet calm of someone used to delivering difficult news. She scanned the room, spotted me standing by the window, and walked over. Mr. Sullivan? I straightened up immediately. How is he? Your son is stable for now. We've started him on IV fluids, administered vitamin K, and we're monitoring his blood work closely. She pointed toward a row of plastic chairs. Can we sit for a moment? We sat down. My legs were shaking so badly I was grateful for the chair. Mr. Sullivan, your son was exposed to a toxic dose of an anticoagulant medication, specifically warfarin. Mixed with alcohol, it caused severe, acute bleeding. We caught it in time, but it was extremely close. The words hit me with the force of a heavy impact. Warfarin. Yes. Do you know if Matthew takes any blood thinners? No, he doesn't, I said, my voice raspy. The person who takes warfarin is me. I've been on it for 6 years for a heart condition. Dr. Stone's brow furrowed. Is there any chance he could have taken your medication by mistake? Grabbed the wrong bottle? Not possible, I said, shaking my head firmly. Matthew doesn't live with me. He has his own place across town. He didn't have access to my medicine cabinet. She made a quick note on her tablet. In that case, we need to determine how this happened. Warfarin doesn't just show up in someone's system on its own. I didn't even have a chance to answer before the automatic doors slid open, and Ophelia came rushing in, holding Grace's hand. Her eyes were bloodshot, her hair was a mess, and she was completely out of breath. Doctor, is he okay? Is Matthew going to be all right? Dr. Stone stood up. His condition is stable. We're currently treating him. Could it have been something at the party? Ophelia interrupted, her eyes darting between me and the doctor. Food poisoning. A bad batch of shrimp? Did someone screw up the catering? Mom, this isn't food poisoning, Dr. Stone said, her tone gentle but firm. This is chemical toxicity. Your husband ingested a high concentration of warfarin. Ophelia blinked. Warfarin? But how is that possible? Could someone have accidentally given him the wrong medication? Could it have been contaminated? Could Ophelia, I said quietly. Let the doctor finish. She froze, her mouth half open, her eyes flicking between me and the doctor. But something about the way she was asking questions felt off. She wasn't asking, "Is he going to pull through?" Or, "When can I see him?" She was asking, "What do they know?" Dr. Stone looked at her watch. "We're moving Matthew to the ICU for observation. His vitals are improving, but we need to monitor him closely over the next 24 hours. Once he's settled, you can go in for a brief visit." "Thank you," I said, my voice sounding distant even to me. Dr. Stone walked away. Grace curled up in a chair, tightly clutching a stuffed bear someone had brought from home. Ophelia sat across from me, glued to her phone, tapping and scrolling, completely ignoring me. The waiting room was almost deserted. A janitor was mopping in a far corner, the vending machine hummed in the background, and the clock on the wall read 2:47 a.m. I couldn't sleep. My mind kept replaying every second of that evening on a loop. Ophelia, handing me the glass, the look in her eyes, the disappointment on her face when I set it down. Matthew picking up a glass right behind me. But which glass was it? The collapse, the panic, the ambulance, and now this. The warfarin in his system. My warfarin. The realization took shape slowly, like frost creeping across a pane of glass. That drink was meant for me. I raised my head. Ophelia had stepped out into the hallway, holding the phone tightly against her ear. Through the glass partition, I watched her pacing back and forth, gesturing aggressively. Her face tense with anger. She was speaking too softly for me to hear the words, but her body language said everything. That was not the face of a heartbroken, worried wife. That was the face of someone whose plan had just gone horribly wrong. I stood up and moved closer, stopping just around the corner out of her line of sight. Her voice leaked through the gap in the door. "I don't care what you think. It wasn't supposed to happen like this. Listen to me." She cut herself off mid-sentence, turned around, and caught my eye through the glass. For a second, neither of us moved. Then she hung up, shoved the phone into her pocket, and walked back into the waiting room with a bright, albeit trembling, smile. "That was my sister," she said. "Just calling to check in. She's worried sick." I just nodded and said nothing. Outside, the sky was starting to brighten. Dawn in June came slowly, but it was coming all the same. Dr. Stone returned just after 5:11 a.m. "Matthew is stable. The internal crisis has been managed. You can see him now, but only for a few minutes." I followed her through a labyrinth of hallways into the ICU. Matthew was lying in a narrow hospital bed, as pale as the sheets beneath him, with IV lines running from his arms and monitors softly beeping beside him. His chest rose and fell. He was alive. I sat down next to him and took his hand. It was freezing cold. "I don't know what happened last night, son," I whispered. "But I promise you, I will find out." He didn't answer. The monitors kept up their steady beep, and the overhead fluorescent lights hummed quietly. When I returned to the waiting room, Ophelia was fast asleep in a chair across the hall. Her phone was still clutched in her hand, her face peaceful, the absolute picture of a devoted, heartbroken wife. But I had seen that phone call. I had seen the look in her eyes before the tears started falling. For the first time in 9 years, I began to question what kind of woman my son had actually married. The next afternoon, I went back home. The place looked like a crime scene that hadn't been processed yet. Plastic cups were scattered across the coffee table. Plates of half-eaten food sat abandoned on the kitchen counter. A string of decorative lights hung crookedly off the mantelpiece, as if someone had yanked on it in a hurry. The house still smelled faintly of whiskey and barbecue smoke, but I was looking at everything through a completely different lens than I had 24 hours ago. Now, everything had changed. I moved slowly through the living room, categorizing, measuring, recording, and filing away every detail the way I used to organize blueprints. The side table, where I set my glass down, the spot where Matthew collapsed, the doorway where Ophelia had stood, hands over her mouth, tears streaming down her face. I walked into the kitchen. The bottle of whiskey was still sitting on the counter, right where she had left it the night before. I picked it up carefully and turned it in the light. An expensive label, Woodford Reserve, about 2/3 full. I grabbed a sealable Ziploc bag from a drawer, slid the bottle inside, and zipped it shut. Then I pulled a Sharpie from the junk drawer and wrote in clear block letters on the bag. June 8, 2024. Housewarming party. Whiskey. Ophelia. Old habits of an architect. Label everything. Document every single detail. I left the bag on the counter and headed toward the bathroom. Inside the medicine cabinet, everything was exactly as I had left it. Organized alphabetically, each prescription bottle lined up in a neat row. Since Eleanor passed away, that's how I've kept things. It helped keep me grounded. I reached for the bottle of warfarin, an orange cap, a white label, with my name printed in black ink. Christopher Sullivan. Warfarin, 5 milligrams, take 1 daily. I unscrewed the cap and poured the pills onto the counter. Then I started counting. 1, 2, 3, 10, 15, 20, 21, 22. 22 pills. I slowed down and counted them again, arranging them in rows of 5. Exactly 22 pills. This prescription was refilled 2 weeks ago. On May 26th, I take 1 pill every single morning, with breakfast, without fail. That meant I should have had 28 pills left. But I only had 22. 6 pills were missing. I opened the drawer beneath the sink and pulled out my medication log. It was a small notebook where I wrote down every dose I took. Eleanor had gotten me into the habit years ago, after I accidentally doubled up on a dose, and I've stuck with it ever since. A check mark for every day. Every single day accounted for. I flipped to May 26th. Every day since had a check mark next to it. No missed doses, no extras, no mistakes. Someone had taken those pills. I sat down on the edge of the bathtub, still holding the bottle, and forced myself to think clearly. Who had been in this house over the last 2 weeks? Matthew and Ophelia had come over for dinner once. Grace had used the guest bathroom. But I was with them the entire time. James Fletcher had dropped by to deliver some blueprints, but he stayed in the living room. And then, the memory hit me like a physical blow. 3 days before the party, Ophelia had stopped by. She said she wanted to help set up decorations early, to get a head start. I was out in the garage organizing my tools at the time, leaving her alone in the house for about 20 minutes. She had complete uninterrupted access to this bathroom, this cabinet, and this bottle. I stood up, walked back to the kitchen, and opened my laptop. I typed into the search bar, warfarin therapeutic dose versus toxic dose. The results loaded. I scanned the numbers, doing the math in my head. Therapeutic dose, 5 milligrams a day. 6 pills amounted to 30 milligrams. Crushed into a drink and combined with alcohol. For someone who doesn't normally take the medication, it was enough to trigger a severe, life-threatening internal hemorrhage. Enough to cause catastrophic damage or worse. I closed the laptop and stared at the bottle of whiskey in the Ziploc bag. I needed confirmation. I needed lab results. I pulled out my phone and scrolled through my contacts until I found the name I was looking for. Michael Torres. We had worked together on a bridge project in Seattle 20 years ago. He later transitioned into forensic engineering, analyzing structural failures and testifying in court cases. He was bound to know the right people. The phone rang 3 times before he picked up. Chris Sullivan. Long time no see. Hey, Michael, I need a favor. There was a pause on the line. What kind of favor? I need something tested quietly and discreetly. Off the record. Another pause, longer this time. Chris, what's going on? I can't explain right now, but I need to know if there's warfarin in a bottle of whiskey. And I need to know as soon as possible. Michael let out a slow breath. Jesus, Chris? Can you help me or not? Yeah, I know someone. A private lab in Southeast Portland. They do contract work for law firms and insurance cases. No questions asked. I'll text you the address. Thanks, Michael. I owe you one. Chris, he hesitated. Be careful out there. I will. I hung up. A minute later, my phone buzzed with the address. That afternoon, I drove to the lab Michael recommended. It was an unassuming building near an industrial district, tucked between a warehouse and a tire shop. No sign out front, just a building number on the door. I walked in carrying the Ziploc bag with the whiskey bottle. A woman in a lab coat greeted me at the front desk. She didn't ask for my name, nor did she ask why I needed the test done. She simply took the bag, noted down my phone number, and said, 3 to 5 business days. I'll pay double for expedited results. She looked up. 2 days, but there's an extra fee. That's fine. She nodded. We'll call you when it's ready. By sunset, I was driving home as the sun began to dip behind the mountains. The house was completely empty. Matthew was still in the ICU, Ophelia was at the hospital with him, and Grace was staying with Ophelia's sister. I sat alone in the living room, with my medication log open on my lap, running the math over and over again in my head. 6 pills. I had spent 30 years calculating load capacities, stress points, and the exact moment a structure would collapse under too much weight. This was no different.
Cease.
6 pills, crushed into a single cocktail, were enough to trigger massive internal bleeding before anyone even realized what was happening. And Ophelia had been alone in this house 3 days prior. She had the opportunity to open that damn cabinet. Call me as soon as you have the results. I had told the lab tech. Now, all I could do was wait. The lab results came back 3 days later. I was sitting in my car outside a Safeway, the engine off, with my grocery list forgotten on the dashboard. My phone screen lit up with a new email. No subject line, just the sender, Pacific Northwest. Forensic Labs. I should have waited. I should have driven home, sat down, and prepared myself before opening it, but I couldn't. Right there in the parking lot, I clicked it open. The very first line made my heart sink into my chest. Analysis complete. Warfarin detected. I had to read it a second time. Then a third. The concentration was listed in milligrams per serving. At first, the number didn't even register. 450. 450 milligrams in a single serving. I stared at that number until my vision blurred. Then, with trembling hands, I opened a browser on my phone and searched. Warfarin safe dosage. The results popped up instantly. A normal therapeutic dose was 2 to 10 milligrams a day. Not all at once, and certainly not mixed into a glass of whiskey. 450 milligrams. My mind did the quick math, a reflex from a lifetime as an architect, and the answer hit me like a runaway freight train. It wasn't a mistake. Nobody accidentally crushed those pills and dropped them into the wrong glass. Combined with alcohol, that amount was lethal. And that night at the party, there was plenty of alcohol flowing. 450 milligrams of warfarin was more than enough to cause catastrophic internal bleeding, long before anyone could figure out what was wrong. I sat in the car for I don't know how long, maybe 10 minutes, maybe 20. People pushed shopping carts past my vehicle. 2 spaces over, a woman was loading groceries into her minivan. Somewhere nearby, a kid dropped an ice cream cone and burst into tears. Normal, everyday life was moving right along around me while I sat there completely paralyzed. Because the lab report on my phone wasn't just a confirmation. It was proof. Proof that someone had tried to end my life. I drove straight to the hospital. When I walked into the room, Matthew was sitting up. 4 days after the party, color had finally returned to his face. There were fewer tubes connected to him now. He looked exhausted, but he was alive. "Hey, Dad," he said with a faint smile. "They told me I might be able to go home in a day or 2. I pulled a chair up close to the bed and sat down, forcing my expression to stay neutral. "That's great news, son." He leaned forward slightly, wincing from the movement. "Dad, what actually happened that night?" I could feel the lab report sitting heavy in my jacket pocket. I had an overwhelming urge to lay it all out, to pull out my phone, show him the numbers, and force him to see the truth. The urge was almost impossible to suppress. But I looked at him sitting in that hospital bed, still pale and frail. I knew I couldn't. Not yet. "What do you mean?" I asked. "The doctors keep saying a reaction to a substance, but I don't take any medication, and they won't give me a straight answer. That's why I'm asking you." I chose my words with extreme care. It was a severe reaction. They're still looking into it. A reaction to what? They don't know yet. He studied my face closely. "Dad, are you okay? You look—" "I'm fine." I cut him off quickly. "Your only job right now is to recover. That's all that matters." He didn't look convinced, but before he could press further, the door swung open. Ophelia walked in carrying a vase of fresh flowers. "Honey, you're sitting up!" She hurried to the bedside, set the flowers on the table, and kissed his forehead. "You scared me to death. I thought I was going to lose you." I watched her. I watched the way she stroked his hair, listened to the calculated catch in her voice when she said the word lose, and saw the tears fall right on cue, as if she had rehearsed the whole performance. Flawless. "You've been amazing through all of this," Matthew said, squeezing her hand. "I don't know what I'd do without you." Ophelia smiled, but for a fraction of a second, her eyes flicked over to me, testing me, searching my expression. I kept my face entirely blank. "I'll be right back," she said a moment later. "I need to step out and take a call." She's exited the room with her phone already pressed against her ear. Matthew turned back to me. "Dad, she really is incredible." I nodded. I didn't trust myself to say a single word. I knew the truth now, but I couldn't tell him. Not while he was sitting in that bed, fragile and deeply grateful for her act. After visiting hours ended, I met James Fletcher at a cafe a few blocks from the hospital. We sat in a corner booth far away from the other patrons. "How's Matthew doing?" James asked. "Physically, much better." James tilted his head. "But—" I stared down at my coffee. "Something about that night just doesn't add up." "What do you mean?" I hesitated, carefully measuring my words. "I need to know more about Ophelia, James." Her background, her finances, what she's been up to for the last few years. James leaned back against his seat and studied me intently. You think she has something to do with this? It wasn't really a question. I think before I make any moves, I need clear answers. He was quiet for a long moment, then slowly nodded. What are you going to do? I'm going to hire someone, a private investigator. All right, James exhaled slowly. Chris, if your suspicions are right, this is going to tear your family apart. I know. And what if you're wrong? If you're wrong? I looked up at him. Then I'll live with the consequences. After James left, I sat alone in my car in the hospital parking lot. The sun was beginning to drop behind the western hills, casting long shadows across the pavement. I pulled out my phone and dialed the number I had looked up earlier. That morning. It rang 3 times before a woman answered. Morgan Investigations, this is Denise. Miss Morgan, my name is Chris Sullivan. I need to hire you for a confidential matter. There was a short pause. What kind of matter, Mr. Sullivan? I took a deep breath. I need you to look into someone, my daughter-in-law. Another pause, longer this time. May I ask why? I have reason to believe she attempted to harm me. Before I go to the authorities, I need solid evidence. When can you meet? Tomorrow morning. Name the place. There's a place called Tin Shed on Burnside Street. I'll meet you there at 8 a.m. She hesitated briefly. Mr. Sullivan, if your instincts are correct, this is going to get very complicated. I know. And if I'm wrong, I'll bear the consequences myself. I hung up. The parking lot was nearly empty by now. The sky outside had turned a deep shade of pinkish orange, the kind of sunset Eleanor used to love. I remembered 30 years ago, watching her stand by the kitchen window of our old apartment, looking at the sun setting over the city skyline. She always knew what to do. She always had the answers, but she was gone now. And I couldn't tell Matthew that his wife had tried to end my life. Not yet. Not until I had indisputable, undeniable proof that he couldn't ignore. Not while he was still lying in that hospital bed, weak and vulnerable, filled with gratitude for her performative care. So I made the call I had been avoiding. The call that would either confirm my worst fears or prove that I was losing my mind. Denise Morgan's office was located on the 3rd floor of a nondescript building in downtown Portland. She opened the door herself. She was in her late 40s, with sharp, observant eyes that seemed to take my entire measure in 3 seconds flat. Mr. Sullivan, please come in. The office was professional without being flashy. A few filing cabinets, a desk holding 2 monitors, framed credentials, licenses, and PI certifications on the wall, along with a photograph of her shaking hands with someone I didn't recognize. She pointed toward the chair across from her desk. I took a seat. Tell me what happened, she said. I laid out the entire situation in detail. My son had been poisoned at my housewarming party. Warfarin. My prescription medication. The glass had been meant for me. 6 pills were missing from my bottle. My daughter-in-law had been alone in my house 3 days before the party. And then there was the lab report confirming a deliberate, massive overdose. I pulled out the documents I'd brought along, the lab report and my detailed timeline, which I'd organized with dates and specifics, just like I used to mark up blueprints. Denise took them and skimmed through every page, her face completely unreadable. Classic signs of a financial motive, she said at last. Let me run a full background check. I gave her all the information I had. Ophelia's full name, Ophelia Sinclair Sullivan. Her social security number, which I'd found on some old tax papers, Matthew had left at my place years ago. Her birth date and current address. "Give me 3 days for an initial check," she said. "A week for the full report. My retainer is $2,000, and it's hourly after that." I wrote the check. 3 days later, my phone rang. "Mr. Sullivan, can you come by my office? I found a few things you need to see in person." I drove downtown, parked in the same garage, and took the elevator to the 3rd floor. Denise had a thick folder ready on her desk. She opened it and slid the first stack of papers over to me. "Credit report. Your daughter-in-law is $320,000 in debt." I stared at the number. That can't be right. Matthew gives her money. She works too. She makes about $18,000 a year in real estate commissions. The debt started before the marriage when it was $90,000. After they got married, it grew to $320,000. She spread out the documents. Credit card bills, 15 odd cards, all maxed out. Personal loans, payday loans, store accounts I'd never even heard of. A wave of nausea hit me. And here are the recent application records. Denise flipped to another page. Every loan application was denied. Some even had forged income statements attached. I couldn't say a word. She pulled her laptop closer and turned the screen toward me. Search history from the past 6 months. These Google searches were recovered from the home computer shared by Matthew and Ophelia. The screen displayed a list. How to contest a will. Requirements for determining elder incapacity. Oregon inheritance law for in-laws. Power of attorney for aging parents. Warfarin overdose symptoms. The date of that last search was 3 weeks before my housewarming party. A chill ran straight through me. "There's one more thing," Denise said. 2 months ago, she met with an attorney named Richard Northrop. He's a specialist in elder law. What did she ask him? "I'm still looking into it. Attorney-client privilege makes it tricky, but I'll figure it out." I sat there, staring at the papers covering the desk. The credit report, the search history, and that timeline so precise, it was impossible to believe it was a coincidence. $320,000. Searches about inheritance and incapacity. Warfarin. Overdose symptoms. A meeting with an elder law attorney 2 months before the party. She had tried to poison me. "This isn't just motive," I said softly. "This was planned way in advance." Denise nodded. "Yes, it certainly was." I drove home in a complete haze. $320,000. My daughter-in-law was drowning in debt, and Matthew had no idea. Meanwhile, for months leading up to my housewarming party, she had been researching how to inherit property from an elderly parent-in-law, how to prove I was unfit, and, most dangerously, the symptoms of a warfarin overdose. The picture wasn't just clear, it was screaming at me. But I couldn't go to the authorities just yet, not with only this. Search histories could be explained away. Being in debt wasn't a crime, and meeting with a lawyer wasn't proof of attempted murder. I needed more. I needed proof that she was the one who took those pills from my cabinet. Proof that she crushed them and put them into that glass. Proof connecting her actions directly to the tragedy that happened to Matthew. Because if I accused her right now, if I took what I had to Matthew, she would deny everything. She would cry. She would play the victim. And my son, lying weak in a hospital bed, still feeling grateful for her act, would believe her, not me. So I kept driving, kept thinking, and kept calculating, just like I always do. 5 days after hiring Denise, on a Tuesday, I saw Claire Davidson again. I was passing by a cafe near Matthew and Ophelia's neighborhood, heading to pick up Grace after she spent the afternoon playing at the park. Ophelia had texted me to arrange the time. Everything seemed casual, totally normal. But a scene through the window made me stop dead in my tracks. Claire was sitting in a corner booth with Ophelia. Not just sitting there, they were talking, leaning in close. It was the kind of posture people take when they don't want anyone else to hear. I stood on the sidewalk, for a moment, trying to digest what I was seeing. Claire, the woman Ophelia introduced at my party as an old friend. The woman who helped plan their wedding. The woman who had asked way too many questions about my house, my finances, and my property value. She was meeting with Ophelia in secret. Keeping my head down, I walked into the cafe, picked a table across from them, and grabbed a discarded newspaper from a nearby chair, pretending to read. An old trick, but effective. Through the gap between the pages, I watched them. Ophelia was showing Claire something on her phone. Both of them were leaning close, heads together. Claire pulled out a small notepad, the kind journalists use, and started taking notes. Their body language was completely wrong. This wasn't two friends catching up over latte. This was business. Very serious business. The conversation lasted about 15 minutes. Then Ophelia checked her watch, said something, and both stood up at the same time. No hugs, no warm goodbyes. Just a slight nod, and they walked out the door in opposite directions. I waited until Ophelia's car pulled out of the parking lot. Then, I made a decision I knew might be foolish. I followed Claire. She was driving a gray sedan, completely inconspicuous. She took side streets, moving without any hurry, while I stayed 2 cars behind. My heart was pounding. I felt like I was in some spy movie, and I felt ridiculous. But I didn't stop. 10 minutes later, she turned onto my street. Not Matthew's street, mine. She parked right across from my house, turned off the engine, and just sat there. I pulled over 2 blocks away, grabbed my phone, and called James Fletcher. "James, it's Chris. Do me a favor. Can I use your side yard for a few minutes?" Sure. What's going on?" "I'll explain later." I slipped through the alley behind his house, went in through the side gate, and crouched behind the fence. From there, I had a clear view of the street. Claire was still sitting in her car, staring at my house. She pulled out her phone and started taking pictures. The front, the sides, the driveway, the garage. She wasn't just looking. She was documenting. 20 minutes. She sat there for 20 full minutes, making notes, taking photos, studying my house, as if she were appraising the property or planning something out. Finally, she started the engine and drove away. I stayed crouched behind James's fence until her taillights disappeared around the corner. I pulled out my phone and called Denise. "Mr. Sullivan, there's someone else involved. A woman named Claire Davidson. She was at my party. Ophelia introduced her as a friend, said she helped plan their wedding, but I just saw them meeting in secret. And just now, Claire was outside my house, taking photos of my property." Denise was quiet for a moment. "Describe what she looks like." "Early 90s, looks sharp, drives a gray sedan. She spent 20 minutes photographing my house from the street. I'll add her to the investigation list. See what I can turn up." "And—" I hesitated. "How many people are actually working with Ophelia?" "Let me dig deeper, Mr. Sullivan. I'll call you back soon." She hung up. I stood in James's yard, staring at the empty street where Claire's car had been parked just moments ago. It wasn't just Ophelia anymore. She had help, a professional. Someone careful enough to keep eyes on my property without getting caught. Except I had just caught her. 2 women, 1 plan, and I was standing alone in the gathering darkness, trying to figure out how to protect myself from people who had already proven they had no limits. 2 weeks after the incident, I received the call I'd been waiting for. Matthew was being discharged. I drove to the hospital, my mind still racing with everything I'd learned, all the evidence I couldn't share yet. Not yet. The nurse met me in the hallway outside his room, clipboard in hand, packed with discharge instructions, medications, follow-up appointments, and ironically, guidelines on monitoring blood thinner levels. I signed where she pointed and stepped into the room. Matthew was sitting on the edge of the bed, wearing the clothes I'd brought him the day before. He looked pale and exhausted, but he was alive. "Ready to go home, son?" He nodded. More than ready. The drive to his house was quiet. Matthew stared out the window, saying very little. I glanced at him every now and then, trying to read his face. Finally, he spoke up. "Thanks for being there, Dad. I don't remember much about that night, but I know you stayed the whole time." My throat tightened. "Anytime, son." As we pulled into the driveway, but before I could even turn off the engine, Ophelia rushed out. "Honey." She pulled open Matthew's door and practically pulled him out of the car. "Be careful. Don't overexert yourself. Let me hold you." She wrapped her arm around his waist, guiding him toward the house like he was made of fragile glass. Grace ran out right behind her. "Daddy, you're home." She froze when she saw how pale he looked, then looked up at me. "Grandpa, is Daddy all better?" I squatted down and took her little hand. "He's recovering, sweetheart. He just needs plenty of rest." Inside, I helped Matthew back to the bedroom. He sighed, sinking into the bed and leaning back against the pillows. For a moment, it was just the 2 of us in the room. "Dad," he said softly, "I've been trying to remember that night. What did I drink? What actually happened?" Every instinct inside me was screaming. "Tell him, pull out your phone, show him the lab reports, the credit card bills, the search history. Let him see everything you've seen." But I looked at him sitting there, pale and exhausted, and I knew I couldn't. Not yet. He was too weak right now. What if I was wrong? What if accusing Ophelia broke him completely? "The doctors said it was warfarin," I said carefully. "Somehow, it got into your system. They're still looking into how it happened. Don't force yourself to think about it. Your only job right now is getting your strength back." Matthew frowned. "But I don't take any medication. How could I? Things like this just happen sometimes." A medical mystery, I forced a small smile. "What matters is that you're okay now." He stared at me for a long time, as if he knew I wasn't telling him everything. Then he closed his eyes. "I'm so tired." "Get some sleep," I said. "I'll go downstairs and keep Grace company." In the kitchen, I put on some tea. Ophelia was bustling around me, putting things away, checking her phone, putting on a big show of a family getting back to normal. Then I heard her voice from the next room, low and tense. The door was slightly cracked. She thought Grace and I were outside. I froze by the kettle, straining to listen. "I told you something went wrong," she hissed into the phone. "He's still alive. We need another plan." My blood turned to ice instantly. The risk is too high right now. Everyone's watching. Let's wait. No, I can't talk here. The call ended abruptly. A second later, Ophelia walked back into the kitchen, that bright, cheerful smile back on her face. "Dad, please stay for dinner. I'm making Matthew's favorite." I turned around, forcing my face into a complete blank. My heart was pounding so hard I thought she could hear it. No, thank you, I said. I should let Matthew rest. Too many people around won't be good for his recovery. She tilted her head, studying me. You might be right. He needs quiet. I gave Grace a sug goodbye and walked out to my car. I sat in the driver's seat, gripping the steering wheel so hard my knuckles turned white. She made it crystal clear. We need another plan. We meant her and whoever she was talking to on that phone. Most likely Claire. And another plan meant she wasn't stopping. Whatever happened at my party, that poisoned glass, those 6 pills crushed into the whiskey, that was only the first attempt. My son was recovering at home, trusting his wife completely. And I was the only person who knew she was already plotting her next move. I couldn't just stand by gathering evidence anymore. I had to stop her. 3 days after Matthew got home, Ophelia called me. Her voice was sweet as honey. The kind that makes you want to double-check if it's laced with poison. Dad, I feel so terrible about what happened at the party. I want to help you, to make things right. I sat in the kitchen with my phone pressed against my ear, staying quiet for a long moment. I let the silence stretch out, waiting to see what she'd say next. I know how much you've been going through, she continued, worrying about Matthew all the time. I just feel like I haven't been there for you the way I should be. Interesting choice of words. That's very thoughtful of you, Ophelia, I answered carefully. Matthew mentioned that your gutters need cleaning before winter sets in. I have a ladder, and I happen to be free this Saturday. Let me come take care of it for you. Matthew hadn't mentioned a thing. I cleared those gutters myself 3 weeks ago. Every downspout was completely clear, and I inspected every single seam, but I kept my voice steady anyway. That's really kind of you. It's the absolute least I can do. You've been so worried about Matthew, so let me take a little weight off your shoulders, Dad. The word dad had never sounded so calculated. Saturday works, I said. What time? 10 in the morning. I'll bring the ladder from our garage. It's a great one. A 24-foot aluminum extension ladder. Commercial grade. Commercial grade. She wanted me to know it was sturdy, reliable, and safe. Sounds good. See you then. I hung up. Then I stood there in the kitchen for a full minute, staring at the phone in my hand. She was setting something up. I called James Fletcher right away. James, I need a quick favor. Name it. Around 10:15 on Saturday morning, could you happen to be passing by and drop by my place? Just say you might have left a tool here last week or something. Any quick excuse. There was a pause on the other end. Chris, what's going on? Ophelia's coming over to clean my gutters. So you think. I don't know what to think, but I've got a bad feeling about this. Please, just be there. I'll be there. Saturday morning, I was up by 7, brewed coffee, walked around the house a couple of times, and checked the sightlines through the windows. At 9:30, I set my phone on the living room windowsill, aiming the camera right at the gutters, running along the roofline over the front yard. I opened the camera app and started recording, making sure the shot had a clear view of the driveway and the section of wall where a ladder would most likely go. Must to wait. Then I walked outside at 10 sharp. Her car rolled into my driveway with an aluminum extension ladder strapped to the roof rack. She stepped out, wearing fitted jeans, work boots, and brown leather gloves, with a canvas tool bag slung over her shoulder. She really looked the part, capable, helpful, the perfect daughter-in-law. Good morning, Dad, she said with a bright smile. Great weather to get some home maintenance done, isn't it? Morning, Ophelia. She walked to the back of her car expertly unbuckled the ladder and carried it over to the front of the house. She set it carefully against the wall right above the porch gutters. "You just stay down here," she said, patting my shoulder with a patronizing sweetness. "Your balance isn't what it used to be, and we definitely don't want another trip to the hospital." The comment felt like a slap in the face, but I kept a smile on my face anyway. "You're right about that. I really appreciate you doing this." "Of course." She adjusted the ladder, giving it a gentle shake to test its stability, and started climbing up. The tool bag jostled against her hip with every step. About halfway up, roughly 12 feet off the ground, she paused and looked into the gutter. "Oh my gosh, Dad, this is totally backed up. This is going to take a bit." "Take your time," I called up to her. "Shout if you need anything from down here." She nodded, pulled a small hand rake from her bag, and put on a show of scraping out the gutter. A few leaves drifted down, and she tossed them into the flower bed below. I waited until her attention was completely fixed on the roofline, then casually strolled toward the front door, stepped inside, and moved over to the window where my phone was recording. Looking through the glass, I could see everything crystal clear. What I saw made my blood run cold. Ophelia wasn't cleaning the gutters at all. Her hands were on the ladder itself, messing with the locking mechanism where the two sections overlapped. I've worked with ladders for 40 years. I know how they're built, how they're supposed to lock in place, and exactly how they fail when something goes wrong. She pulled a small tool from her bag, a ratchet socket wrench, the kind meant for precise, deliberate work. She started loosening the bolts that held the extension section together, not taking them off completely, just loosening them up. 2 turns, 3 turns. Then she moved to the safety pins, the little spring-loaded catches that lock the joint solid when the ladder is extended. She pressed the release buttons and slid the pins halfway out, leaving them hanging loose in their slots. It wasn't enough to make the ladder collapse instantly, but it was plenty to make the joint completely give way under a specific weight, or if the balance shifted just enough. The ladder would buckle, and whoever was on it would come crashing straight down. Falling from 15 feet up at my age wasn't just dangerous, it could easily be fatal. She finished the whole thing in under 5 minutes, slipped the wrench back into her bag, and went right back to pretending to scrape the gutter like nothing had happened. Then she called down, "Dad, could you come hold the bottom of the ladder for me? It feels a little wobbly up here." I didn't move. She raised her voice and called out again, "Dad, are you in there?" I stood by the window, in complete silence, just watching. She looked down, frowned, and shifted her weight slightly on the ladder. The frame creaked, but held firm. Her tampering was dangerously clever. The ladder wouldn't fail under her lighter weight, at least not while she was climbing down. But if a heavier person climbed up, or if someone standing at the base accidentally pushed against it, she climbed down slowly, testing each rung before stepping onto the ground. "Dad?" she called toward the house, her voice full of fake concern. I stood by the window, my heart hammering against my ribs, while the phone kept recording. She was right there on my property, in my front yard, having just spent 5 minutes rigging a ladder in hopes that I'd climb up, stand under it, or do something reckless enough to finish the job that poisoned drink failed to do. She thought I was too old to notice anything, too trusting, too blind to see what was right in front of me. But I saw every single detail. Dawn. I was just reaching for the doorknob, trying to figure out a way to decline her request without giving away that I'd been watching her from inside, when I heard the rumble of an engine. James Fletcher's pickup turned into my driveway, right on cue. He parked, stepped out, and gave a wave. "Hey, Chris. Thought I'd drop by to check out that porch railing we were talking about last week." We'd never talked about any railing. But James played his part perfectly. He looked up at Ophelia, standing by the ladder. "Oh, wow. Home maintenance day, huh?" Ophelia looked down, and I caught the flash of irritation in her eyes before she quickly covered it up with a smile. "Just helping Dad clear out his gutters. I've got it handled." James walked over, with his hands in his pockets, carrying the natural posture of someone who'd spent 40 years on construction sites. "Hey, before you climb back up there, let me give that ladder a quick once-over. Old habit. I've seen way too many accidents over the years. Safety first, you know." "It's totally fine," Ophelia said, her smile turning stiff. "I've used this ladder 100 times. "Humor me just this once," James said. His tone was friendly and casual, but there was an edge to it that made it clear he wasn't asking. Ophelia slowly stepped back, standing to the side and gesturing toward the ladder with a stiff hand. "Be my guest." James walked over to the base, grabbed both sides, and gave it a gentle shake, then a harder tug. His expression darkened immediately. "Chris," he said quietly, "come take a look at this." I walked out of the house and stepped closer, working hard to keep my face completely neutral. James pointed right at the overlapping joint of the ladder sections. "These bolts are barely catching. The safety pins are loose, too. This whole load-bearing joint is compromised." He applied pressure to one side to demonstrate. The frame wobbled far beyond normal tolerances. "If anyone climbed more than halfway up this thing," James said, his voice cold, "it would have given out completely. A fall from that height would mean serious injury, broken bones, or worse." I looked at Ophelia. She was standing there with her arms crossed tightly, her jaw clenched tight. I don't understand," I said, playing confused. "Ophelia, was the ladder like this when you brought it out?" She hesitated for just a second before shaking her head. I have no idea. It was completely fine last time I used it. It must have been like that already. I just grabbed it from our garage. Maybe it sat too long, or maybe something rusted out, or—" "Ophelia," James interrupted. He squatted down by the ladder and ran his finger across the head of one of the bolts. "Look at this." He stood up and held his finger out to us. There was a faint trace of fresh metal dust on it. "These scratches are fresh tool marks. See where the wrench gripped it. These bolts were loosened on purpose very recently." The air went dead still. Ophelia's face flushed bright red. "What are you implying?" "I'm saying someone tampered with this ladder." "Are you?" Her voice went high and trembled. "Are you accusing me of something?" James didn't answer. He just kept staring at her. Ophelia turned to me, and I watched tears well up in her eyes. Whether they were real or just a brilliant performance, I couldn't tell. "Dad," she choked out, "after Matthew almost died, you can't possibly think You think I'd want to hurt you?" I looked at her for a long time. Then, very calmly, I said, "I think you need to go home, Ophelia." Her expression twisted. "You'd really take his word over mine? I'm your son's wife. We're family. Go home," I said. She glared at me, dead silent. Then she grabbed her tool bag, yanked the ladder off the ground, and turned to James. "Matthew is going to hear about this. He's going to know how you people treated me." "Drive safe," I said. She tossed the tool bag into her back seat, shoved the ladder onto her roof rack, without bothering to tie it down properly, and got into the car. The engine roared to life. She slammed the car into reverse, tires screeching as she backed out and sped down the driveway. James and I stood there in the sudden silence. "Chris," he finally spoke up. "What on earth is going on here?" I walked back inside, grabbed my phone from the windowsill, and stepped back out. I recorded the whole thing. I pulled up the video and handed the phone over to him. James watched the screen, his face draining of color. "Jesus Christ!" he muttered under his breath. On the screen, Ophelia's hands were working methodically over the ladder joint. The wrench, the bolts, the safety pins, every second clear as day. James handed the phone back to me. "This is attempted harm. You have to call the police." "Not yet. Chris, I need more than this. Or rather, the more she just tried to create. I need proof strong enough to make Matthew believe me," I said. "If I go to him with just this video, she'll cry. She'll say it was a misunderstanding. She'll say the ladder was already broken and she didn't notice. He loves her, James. He'll want to believe her side of it." James stared at me. "And what if she tries something else while you're waiting around? Then I'll be ready." "Chris, I'm not going to my son with a half-baked story," I said. "I need overwhelming proof, something he can't possibly ignore." James shook his head. "You're taking a massive risk. I know." He left a few minutes later, telling me to call if I needed anything, and to be careful. I stood alone in the driveway, holding my phone. I had the lab results proving she poisoned my drink. I had the financial records showing her desperate debt. I had the search history regarding inheritance and incapacity. And now I had video of her rigging a ladder to cause me serious harm or worse. But James was right about one thing. She had just tried again. And someone as desperate and calculated as Ophelia wasn't going to stop until she got what she wanted, or until she was stopped. I needed something indisputable. Something that even Matthew's love for his wife, couldn't blind him to. Denise Morgan called me early Tuesday morning, 4 days after the ladder incident. There was a tone in her voice I'd never heard before. Urgent, mixed with confusion. "Chris, we need to talk about Claire Davidson. Can you come by my office? This isn't something I can explain over the phone." I grabbed my keys. "I'll be there in 20 minutes. When I walked in, Denise had a thick folder sitting on her desk, her laptop open beside it. She didn't waste any time. "I ran that full background check on Claire Davidson like you asked." I sat down. "She's working with Ophelia, right?" Denise hesitated, looking at me closely. "Not exactly." "What do you mean, not Tongsilan?" "Chris, Claire Davidson is a licensed private investigator." The words didn't even register at first. I stared at her. "What?" She turned the laptop toward me. On the screen was a professional licensing database. Claire Davidson, private investigator. License number 47832. Status active. Years in practice 15. Below that were business registration documents, a commercial address in Southeast Portland, dozens of five-star client reviews, and a membership with the Oregon Association of Licensed Investigators. Her specialties were listed right there. Family law cases, infidelity investigations, financial fraud, and asset tracking. "I don't understand," I said slowly. "I saw them together at that cafe. They were meeting, planning something." "That's exactly what stumped me," Denise said. "Why would a private investigator be meeting with Ophelia?" So I kept digging. She pulled a stack of bank statements from the folder and slid them across the desk. "Look at this," 3 months ago, March 15th. I scanned the page. A payment made to Davidson Investigations. $5,000 listed as a retainer fee. And the account holder? My chest tightened up. Matthew Sullivan. Not a joint account, not a shared line. It was Matthew's personal checking account, the one at the teachers' credit union he'd had long before they got married. An account Ophelia couldn't even touch. Matthew hired her, I whispered, my voice sounding distant to my own ears. 3 months before my housewarming party. I looked up at Denise. Why didn't he tell me? I don't know, but here's what I do know. She tapped the bank statement. Claire isn't working for Ophelia. She's working against her. Your son hired a private investigator to look into his own wife. The room suddenly felt way too small, way too hot. My mind raced back through the last few weeks, every interaction, every moment I'd misread. Claire, at my party, I thought she was Ophelia's friend, her accomplice. But she wasn't. She was watching Ophelia, keeping eyes on her, gathering evidence. Claire, taking photos of my house. I thought she was scoping out the place, helping Ophelia plan something. But she wasn't. She was documenting my assets, building a case. Claire meeting Ophelia at the cafe. I thought they were plotting together. But they weren't. Claire was probably questioning her, or tracking her movements, or both. I had it completely backward, I said softly. Denise nodded. It looks like your son suspected something 3 months ago. Enough to hire a professional to step in. Then why keep it from me? That's the real question. She closed her laptop. What did Matthew actually find out? And why did he feel like he couldn't tell his own father? I stood up, my legs feeling a little shaky. I need to go talk to him. Chris, Denise's voice caught me at the door. Be careful. If Matthew has been quietly investigating Ophelia for 3 months, this runs a lot deeper than we thought. I sat in my car in the parking lot with the engine off, gripping the steering wheel tight. Matthew had hired Claire 3 months ago. 3 months before my housewarming party. 3 months before he drank that poisoned glass meant for me and almost lost his life. The timeline made my head spin. What on earth did he find during those 3 months? Did he discover the massive debt? Did he find the search history about inheritances and incapacity? Did Claire tell him what Ophelia was planning? And if he knew, why didn't he warn me? Was he trying to protect me? Was he gathering hard evidence so he wouldn't make accusations he couldn't take back? Or was he holding out hope, praying that the woman he loved couldn't possibly do what the evidence pointed to? I thought back to the night of the party. Matthew standing behind me, reaching for that glass on the side table, drinking it down without a second thought. Was that an accident? Or did he know what was inside it? No, that was crazy. He wouldn't do that. But if not, why hire Claire 3 months ago? Why investigate Ophelia in secret? My son knew something was wrong. His gut was strong enough to make him drop $5,000 on a private detective. Yet whatever it was felt too heavy, or too terrifying, to bring to me. I pulled out my phone and stared at Matthew's name in my contacts. My thumb hovered right over the call button. Then I put the phone back down. I wasn't ready. Not just yet. Because if I called him right now, if I asked him why he hired Claire, what he found out, and why he kept it secret, I'd have to listen to the answer. And I wasn't sure I could handle the truth. Not if it meant my son knew his wife was dangerous. Not if it meant he suspected she might try to hurt me. Not if it meant that when she poisoned a glass at my party, he'd been keeping that secret locked away inside. I started the car and backed out of the parking spot. I needed answers, but for the first time in my life, I was genuinely terrified of what those answers might mean. I couldn't wait any longer. Finding out that Matthew had hired Claire Davidson spent 2 sleepless nights chewing away at me. I had to know what my son actually uncovered and why he'd kept it hidden from me all this time. 2 days after meeting with Denise, I found myself sitting in my car right outside Lincoln High School, where Matthew taught sophomore and junior English. I sat there trying to figure out how to start a conversation I had no idea how to navigate. At 12:30, the lunch bell rang. Students flooded out of the school buildings, laughing and shouting as they headed for the parking lot or the food trucks lined up on the street. Watching them made me feel old, like I didn't belong there at all. Then I spotted Matthew. He walked out of a side door carrying a canvas messenger bag, making his way toward his car. He didn't even notice me until I stepped out of my truck and walked over to him. He stopped dead in his tracks. "Dad? Hey, son." Confusion washed over his face, quickly turning into concern. "What are you doing here? Did something happen?" "I need to talk to you, just for a few minutes. Can we grab a coffee around the corner?" He looked at his watch and hesitated. "All right, there's a place down the block. I've only got 30 minutes, though." It was a tiny local coffee shop with mismatched furniture and student art pinned to the walls. We placed our order at the counter and sat down at a small table by the window. Matthew set his bag on the floor and wrapped both hands around his mug. "So what's going on? You look like you've got the weight of the world on your shoulders." I didn't know how to ease into it, so I just said it plain. "Matthew, I need to ask you something. Have you noticed anything off about Ophelia lately?" His expression went blank, followed immediately by a wall of defensiveness. "What do you mean?" "Financial stress, changes in how she acts, anything that just doesn't feel right." "We're fine, Dad." His voice was careful, guarded. "Why are you asking me this? I'm just worried." "After what happened at the party." "The doctors said that was a reaction to a medication," he interrupted quickly. "A rare accident." I leaned forward. "Was it really an accident?" Matthew froze, staring down into his coffee. The silence between us stretched on way too long. "What else could it be?" he finally asked. I wanted to bring up Claire, the $5,000 payment, and ask why he hired a private investigator 3 months before my party. But something in his eyes held me back. He knew something. I could see it. In the way he refused to make eye contact, in the tightness of his jaw, and in the way his hands gripped that coffee cup like he was holding on to something he couldn't let go of. But he wasn't ready to talk about it. Or he didn't want to. Or he was trying to protect something he couldn't bring himself to say out loud. So I shifted my approach. "That night at the party," I said, "what do you actually remember? Which glass did you drink from?" Another long pause followed. Matthew stared into his cup like the answers were floating at the bottom. "I don't remember," he said quietly. "I've tried so hard to recall it. My mind is just a complete blank." A wave of dizziness hit me. "And then I woke up in the hospital," he added. "You took a glass off the side table," I told him. "Do you remember why you picked up that specific glass?" He looked up and something flashed in his eyes. Realization? Fear? I couldn't tell. "Does it really matter which glass I drank from?" "It might matter a lot." He stared at me for a moment, then checked his watch and stood up. "Dad, I really have to get back to my class. We'll talk about this another time." "Matthew." "Another time," he said, his voice firm and final. My students are waiting for me." He grabbed his bag and walked out. I sat there alone, watching him through the window. Matthew crossed the street, heading back toward the school. Then he stopped, pulled out his phone, and made a call. I couldn't hear what he was saying, but his body language spoke volumes. Tense, urgent. Pressing one hand against his forehead like he had a splitting headache, pacing back and forth on the sidewalk. Who was he calling? Ophelia? Claire or someone else? Entirely? The call lasted about 2 minutes before he hung up. He stood there for a second, staring at his phone, then turned around and walked inside the building. I sat in that cafe for another 10 minutes, staring at my untouched coffee. My son was hiding something. That much was crystal clear. But what was he trying to protect? Was he trying to protect me? Keeping secrets to gather evidence on his own, hiring Claire Davidson 3 months before my party. Or was he protecting Ophelia out of love? Protecting a woman who might have tried to end my life, driven by denial and misdirected loyalty. Or maybe he was just protecting himself from facing a truth too terrifying to look at. Refusing to admit that his wife, the mother of his daughter, was capable of something so monstrous. I had come looking for answers, but I left with even more questions. One thing was certain. Matthew's silence was far more dangerous than Ophelia's scheming. Because if my son knew something and wasn't telling me, then whatever he discovered 3 months ago was either too horrific to share or too complicated for me to grasp. Either way, my time was running out. Ophelia had already tried twice. The drink, the ladder. She was going to try again. If Matthew knew this and had been keeping quiet for 3 months without warning me, I couldn't wait for him to build up the courage to speak. I had to act right now. 2 days later, on Sunday morning, Denise Morgan called me. I was out in the garage, pretending to organize my tools when the phone rang. Her voice sounded tight. "Chris, I found something. It's worse than we thought. Can you come to my office right now?" I was there in 20 minutes. Denise had her laptop open, with files spread across her entire desk. She skipped the pleasantries and motioned for me to sit down. I managed to get Ophelia's phone records from a cloud backup of her text messages. There's someone else involved. My heart sank. She turned her laptop toward me, showing a text thread. The contact name was just Christine, with no last name listed. Christine Sinclair, 32, lives in Seattle. Denise pulled up a driver's license photo. The woman on the screens looked like Ophelia. Younger, with sharper features, but definitely family. She's Ophelia's younger sister. I stared at the photo. I had no idea Ophelia had a sister. Most people don't. They aren't close publicly, but in private. Denise pushed a stack of printed text logs across the desk. These start 6 months ago. I picked up the top page. The earliest messages were from February, 4 months back. Christine was asking Ophelia if she had talked to that lawyer yet. Ophelia said she had, and that the lawyer told her if they could prove I was incapable of managing my own affairs, control would transfer to Matthew, and through Matthew, straight to her. Christine asked what would happen if I didn't cooperate. Ophelia's response made my blood run ice cold. There are always ways to make someone look incapable. My hands began to shake. The next set of messages was from March, 3 months before my party. Christine told Ophelia she found a source, someone who could get what Ophelia needed, but it would cost $800. Ophelia told her to go ahead and said she would wire the money. A day later, Christine confirmed she had sent it. No paper trail. She wrote. Denise pointed to another document on her desk. I tracked that $800. Ophelia sent it through a money order. Christine used that cash to buy warfarin from an online pharmacy in Mexico. She showed me the receipts and the delivery confirmation to Christine's address in Seattle, followed by a second shipping record. A week later, Christine mailed a package to Ophelia. She bought the poison, I whispered, and shipped it right to Ophelia. Yes. I flipped to the next page. These texts were from late May, 2 weeks before my housewarming party. Christine asked Ophelia if she got the package. Ophelia said she did, adding that my party, this Saturday, would be the perfect opportunity. Christine told her to be careful and make it look natural. A heart attack or a stroke fits someone your age, Ophelia replied. I know what to do. I could barely catch my breath. The next message was dated June 9th, the day after the party. Christine asked what happened, followed by a string of question marks. A panicked Ophelia told her that things had gone wrong, that Matthew had drank the poison instead of me. Christine's replies were all in capital letters, full of disbelief, asking if Ophelia was joking and demanding to know if Matthew was okay. Ophelia said he was in the hospital, and the doctors knew it was warfarin poisoning but that he would recover. Christine called her an idiot, saying it was a total disaster. Ophelia said she knew, telling Christine to delete everything and stop texting her. Christine's final message in that thread read, "It's a little late for that now." They tried to delete it, Denise said, but I recovered everything from the cloud backup. I set the papers down, my hands trembling too much to hold them. They were in this together. Denise nodded. Christine provided the means, Ophelia executed it. Classic conspiracy. There was one more set of messages from 3 days ago, right after the latter incident. Christine asked if Ophelia went through with it, if she finished what she started. Ophelia said I didn't take the bait, that my neighbor showed up, and that she thought I was onto something. Christine told her to back off immediately, warning that she was going to get caught. But Ophelia said she couldn't stop now, that I was investigating, and that she had to finish this before I uncovered the whole truth. Christine's last message was simple. You've gone crazy. I looked up at Denise, my throat feeling tight. This is planned. Harm. Conspiracy. Yes. And Christine's involvement means if we go to the authorities, both sisters will face charges. Do we have enough proof? Denise leaned back in her chair. For the police? Absolutely. The texts, money orders, pharmacy records, and shipping confirmations. It's all documented. They can't explain this away. What about Matthew? She studied my face carefully. That's your call, Chris. You're his father. You know him better than I do. Will he accept this? Or will he try to convince himself it's all just a misunderstanding? I didn't answer. Because I honestly didn't know. I drove home, with the folder full of printed text messages sitting on the passenger seat. It wasn't just Ophelia. Her sister had helped her, finding someone willing to sell illegal medication, guiding her through the plan, knowing exactly what Ophelia was planning at my party, and only getting angry when the wrong person drank it. 2 sisters, chasing an inheritance they'd already spent in their minds. Over $320,000 in debt between them, maybe more. They had been planning this for months, since February at least, maybe even longer. Buying warfarin from Mexico, shipping it across state lines, timing the whole thing down to the exact day and hour. And when it failed, when Matthew collapsed instead of me, Ophelia didn't stop. She tried again with the latter. Meanwhile, somewhere in Seattle, Christine Sinclair was waiting to hear if her sister had finally finished the job. I pulled into my driveway and sat there with the engine off, staring at that folder. I had everything now. Financial records showing Ophelia's debt, search about inheritance and incapacity, and video of her tampering with the latter. Now I had these text messages, proof that this was premeditated, proof that she didn't act alone. The question was, what was I going to do with all of it? The social worker arrived on Thursday afternoon, 3 days after my meeting with Denise about Christine. I had been expecting this day to come. It was the next logical step for Ophelia, but seeing that state vehicle pull into my driveway still brought a chill to my spine. I opened the door before she even had a chance to ring the bell. She was in her 30s, dressed professionally, holding a clipboard and wearing an official agency badge. "Mr. Sullivan, I'm Sharon Ellis from Adult Protective Services. We received a report raising concerns about your well-being. May I come in?" I had prepared myself for this moment. "Of course, please come in." I led her into the living room and offered her some tea. She accepted and set her clipboard on the coffee table as she sat down. I brought out 2 mugs from the kitchen and took the chair across from her. Sharon opened her folder. "I want to be upfront with you. The report alleges several issues: potential self-neglect, confusion, memory decline, and an unsafe living environment. The reporting party expressed concern that you may no longer be able to live independently." I kept my voice steady. "I understand. May I ask who filed this report?" "Reports can be filed anonymously," Sharon said in a neutral, professional tone. "However, I can tell you it came from a family member who claimed to be concerned about your welfare. My daughter-in-law, Ophelia." Sharon's expression remained carefully neutral. "I can't confirm the source, but I'm here today to evaluate the situation objectively." "I understand. Where would you like to start?" She stood up. "If it's all right with you, let's take a walk through the house." I walked her through every single room. The living room was clean and organized, free of clutter or safety hazards. The kitchen was stocked with fresh food, everything in its place. In the bathroom, medications were stored neatly in the cabinet, all clearly labeled with current dates. Sharon took photos of the prescription labels and made a few notes. "You're taking warfarin and a few heart medications, all current prescriptions." "Yes, my cardiologist monitors everything closely." The bedroom was spotless, the bed made neatly. Not a single issue anywhere. Sharon kept taking notes throughout the entire walkthrough. Back in the living room, she reviewed her clipboard again. "Mr. Sullivan, your home is in excellent shape. I don't see any signs of self-neglect or an unsafe living environment." "Thank you. I should also mention that I brought along some supporting documentation that might be relevant." I pulled out the folder I had prepared, knowing this day was inevitable. Inside was a recent medical clearance from my cardiologist, Dr. Raymond Hughes, issued just a week ago, along with results from a cognitive assessment showing a perfect score. There were also financial records showing balanced accounts, bills paid right on time, property tax receipts, current insurance policies, and home maintenance logs. Sharon carefully reviewed every single page. "This is extremely thorough. Most people I visit don't have records this detailed ready to go. I'm a retired architect. Keeping things organized is just second nature to me. These medical clearances and cognitive tests are very helpful. They show 0 signs of incapacity." She closed her folder. "Mr. Sullivan, based on what I've seen today and the documentation you've provided, I see no evidence to support the concerns raised in that report." I leaned forward slightly. Sharon, I need to tell you something. I believe this report was filed out of retaliation. Her pen paused over her paper. Retaliation for what? Can I show you something? It connects directly to your investigation. She gave a slow nod. Go ahead. I opened my laptop and pulled up the files that had been weighing on my chest for weeks. First, here are the lab results from that bottle of whiskey. It shows 450 milligrams of warfarin detected in a single glass. Combined with alcohol, that's a lethal dose. Sharon's professional mask slipped just a bit as she read through the document. Second, here's a video from my phone. It shows Ophelia loosening the bolts on a ladder and removing the safety pins from the load-bearing joint. I played the recording, and Sharon watched in complete silence. And third, these are text messages recovered from a cloud backup between Ophelia and Christine Sinclair. The planning, the purchase, the disaster after the party. Sharon read through every single line twice. Finally, here's an investigation report showing Ophelia is $320,000 in debt. I handed her a timeline laying everything out chronologically, from February right up to today. Sharon set her pen down. Mr. Sullivan, are you saying your daughter-in-law tried to poison you? I'm saying the evidence points right to it. When that plan failed, she tried tampering with a ladder. And when that failed too, she filed a false report with your agency to make me look incapable. Have you gone to the police? Not yet. I've been gathering evidence, but yes, that's my next step. Sharon closed her notebook. You're one of the most capable individuals I've evaluated in my 10 years with APS. Your home is safe, your mind is sharp, and your affairs are impeccably managed. This case will be closed as unfounded. Thank you. She stood up and gathered her materials. However, I'm legally required to report suspected elder abuse to our investigation unit and law enforcement. What you've shown me points to financial exploitation, intentional harm, and filing a false report. Those are serious criminal matters. My chest tightened. I understand. I'll be forwarding my evaluation and your evidence to Detective Eric Jensen with the Portland Police Department. You can expect a call from him within 24 hours. I'll be ready. After Sharon Ellis left, I stood by the window and watched her drive away. Her official report clearing me had already been filed electronically. Ophelia's attempt to use the system against me had completely backfired. Instead of making me look unfit, it triggered a formal investigation into her own actions. Within 24 hours, the police were going to be involved. Everything I had gathered, every piece of evidence, every carefully documented detail, was about to become part of a criminal case. The house I bought as a quiet sanctuary had turned into the center of an investigation. But for the first time in weeks, I felt a sense of relief wash over me. I wasn't standing alone anymore. The system was finally stepping in. The next morning, at 8:47, Detective Eric Jensen called. I knew the exact time because I'd been up since 5, drinking coffee and staring at my phone, waiting. Mr. Sullivan, this is Detective Eric Jensen with the Portland Police Department. Adult Protective Services transferred your case over to me. I need you to come down to the station. Can you make it by 10? I'll be there at 9:50. I arrived at the precinct 10 minutes early. The building was typical institutional gray, all hard surfaces and harsh fluorescent lighting. A uniformed officer directed me up to the 3rd floor to the detective division. Detective Eric Jensen met me in the hallway. He was in his late 40s, with sharp, experienced eyes and a straightforward, professional manner. He gave my hand a firm shake. Mr. Sullivan, thanks for coming in so quickly. He led me into an interview room, bare walls, a metal table, and recording equipment mounted in the corner. The chairs were designed to be anything but comfortable. Jensen sat across from me and opened a folder. I've gone over Sharon Ellis's report and the preliminary evidence. We need to walk through everything systematically. This might take a few hours. I've got all the time you need. I brought along all my records, neatly organized in color-coded folders. Jensen worked through each document methodically, taking notes and asking clarifying questions. First came the lab results from the whiskey bottle. 450 milligrams of warfarin, Jensen read aloud. Chain of custody is solid. That's heavy. Next. Then Matthew's medical records from Providence Portland Medical Center, dated June 8th. Diagnosis: warfarin poisoning. Treatment notes detailed vitamin K injections and blood transfusions. Next were my prescription records. You were missing 6 pills, Jensen noted. Refilled on May 26th. You kept a detailed log. I'm careful with my health. Then came the timeline, proving Ophelia had access to my house 3 days before the party, followed by the video from my phone, showing her loosening the ladder bolts and removing safety pins, complete with untouched timestamps and metadata. Denise Morgan's investigation report came next. $320,000 in debt, along with internet search history showing queries about inheritances, incapacity, and warfarin overdose symptoms. Then, the text messages between Ophelia and Christine Sinclair recovered from the cloud backup. Jensen read through those twice. Financial documents showing the $800 money order, pharmacy records from Mexico, and shipping confirmations to Seattle followed. Finally, James Fletcher's witness statement regarding the latter incident. Jensen reviewed every single item twice, his pen moving steadily across his notepad. Finally, he looked up. This is an exceptionally strong body of evidence, extremely well documented. I'm an architect. I understand the importance of structural integrity when it comes to proof. Jensen closed the folder. We need to speak with your son. He's a victim here, too. He needs to know what happened. My chest tightened up. He doesn't know. Not the whole picture. He drank the poisoned glass meant for me. He's both a witness and a victim. We need his statement. Can I be there when you tell him? Actually, I'd prefer if you were. Jensen reached for the phone. I'll call him right now. He dialed the number and put it on speaker. Matthew Sullivan. Matthew's voice sounded cautious. This is Detective Eric Jensen with the Portland Police Department. I need you to come down to the station regarding an ongoing investigation. No, you're not in any trouble. This is regarding the incident at your father's housewarming party. Can you come in now? A pause followed. Matthew's confusion coming through the line clear as day. Yes. I can be there in 45 minutes. Ask for me at the front desk. Thank you. Jensen hung up and looked over at me. This isn't going to be easy for him. I know. So we waited. Jensen flipped through the documents once more while I drank terrible coffee from a styrofoam cup, staring at the clock. 43 minutes later, a knock came at the door. A uniformed officer opened it, and Matthew walked in. He spotted me first. Dad, what's going on? Why are the police involved? Jensen stood up. Please, sit down. Mr. Sullivan, I need to explain a few things. Matthew sat down slowly, his eyes darting between the two of us. Jensen opened the folder and began laying out the evidence piece by piece, like an architect assembling a framework. The lab results, the missing pills, the massive debt, the text messages, the video. I watched my son's face transform as the evidence piled up. First came disbelief. There must be some misunderstanding. Then shock. This can't be real. Then fear. That glass. I drank from Dad's glass. Then denial. There has to be another explanation. And finally, painful acceptance. Matthew's hands were shaking as tears streamed down his face. He looked across the table at me. She tried to kill you. And I drank it. Jensen's voice was gentle. That glass was meant for your father. You weren't the target. Matthew's voice broke. I could have died. You came very close, I said softly. Matthew tried to process it all, his breathing coming in short, ragged gasps. All this time she was, oh God, Dad, I'm so sorry. Jensen leaned forward. Matthew, did you notice anything unusual about your wife leading up to the party? Matthew stared down at the table, tears dripping onto the metal surface. When he finally looked up, his face was filled with pure anguish. I have to tell you something. He looked at Jensen, then back at me. Can I talk to my father alone, just for a minute? Jensen looked at me, and I nodded. 5 minutes. I'll be right outside. He gathered his folder and stepped out, closing the door behind him. The door shut, leaving Kathy and me alone in that sterile interview room with its gray walls and metal table. My son looked at me across the table, tears streaming down his face, and said something that made my heart drop straight to my stomach. Dad, I have to tell you. I knew something was wrong 3 months ago. I hired Claire. I've been investigating Ophelia since March. In that exact moment, everything clicked. My son hadn't been blind. He had been gathering evidence all along, too. The two of us had been walking on parallel tracks, each trying to protect the other, neither knowing the other was doing the exact same thing. Why didn't you tell me? I asked softly. Matthew took a shaky breath and began to explain everything. And what he told me in that small room completely turned everything I thought I understood upside down.